Today we will begin our class now, and today I have another topic with you to discuss with you, and this is post-colonial literature. So this is our topic, and uh, post-colonial literature. So we'll be talking about or discussing this particular topic. So let us look at this essay. Firstly, we have to understand what is post-colonial literature. So it is a significant field of literary studies that examines the cultural, political, social, and psychological effects of colonialism and imperialism. So obviously, you know that our country, we were under the colonial rule of the British. So when we are talking about post-colonial literature, we have to discuss or we have to consider the kind of literature that was produced after the end of the British rule, that is, after the end of colonial rule. And one other thing which is important here, that is, what was the impact of colonial rule on our cultural, political, social, and at the psychological level also. So not just India or the Indian subcontinent, but everywhere, where uh, countries were under either British rule or French rule or Belgian rule. So any kind of European power which uh, had conquered some countries and had established its rule over them. Now, it refers to literary works produced by writers from countries that were once colonized by European powers, such as Britain, France, Spain, Portugal, and the Netherlands. So, obviously, these were the main countries which had colonized many countries, many other countries. And now, now that the colonial period has ended, we can look at the literary works which are produced by the writers hailing from these countries. So what do these works explore? These works explore the experiences of colonized peoples, their struggles for identity, resistance against oppression, and the lasting consequences of colonial rule. So these are some of the main issues here. So the writers from these colonized countries, they are writing and expressing their thoughts about the identity, their identity. They are resisting the colonial oppression, and they are talking about the results or the consequences of colonial rule. Now, the term post-colonial, what does it signify? It does not simply mean after colonialism. Post means after, and colonialism, obviously, you understand. So, post-colonialism, it does not mean just after colonialism. That is a chronological kind of, time after the end of colonialism. Rather, it encompasses the continuing impact of colonial domination and the ways in which formerly colonized societies negotiate their identities in the aftermath of imperial control. So something much more deep, something deeper at the deeper level. And what is this? After the end of colonial rule, say a country like ours, which has gained independence long ago in 1947. Now, in what ways is it being in what ways the impact of colonial domination is still continuing? So, and how are we responding to it? Uh, the negotiation part. So, what is our identity now? Indians in the post colonial India. Post colonial literature gives voice to marginalized communities and challenges the dominant narratives imposed by colonial powers. So, post colonial literature, it is a medium which gives voice to marginalized communities. Marginalized, obviously, you understand, those which were put aside, which were not given prominence. And the dominant narrative, which was propagated and proclaimed by the colonial powers, that is put aside now, and the colonized voice is heard. Through novels, poems, plays, and essays, post colonial writers seek to reclaim their histories, cultures, and identities. So, this is post colonial literature in different genres of literature, in different ways. They are expressing their opinions and looking at their own histories. They're talking about their cultures and they're trying to build up or find their identities. So, this is the first paragraph. Now, the historical background. Colonialism was a system through which powerful European nations established political, economic, and cultural control over vast territories in Asia, Africa, the Caribbean, and Latin America. So, there were certain powerful European nations. We had a look at the names: Great Britain, France, Spain, Portugal, Netherlands. So, these were some of the European countries. Some of the European countries which had a kind of, they had control over the countries in Asia, in Africa, in the Caribbean islands, and also in Latin America or South America. The colonizers often regarded their cultures as superior and attempted to impose their language, religion, education, and social values on the colonized populations. So, this was an attempt by the colonizers to impose their own language, religion, education, and social values. So, language, the language of the colonizers, religion, which was often different, educational pattern, social values. So, these four things. During the 19th and 20th centuries, many colonies gained independence through nationalist movements and political struggles. So, the countries which had been colonized, they were gradually gaining their independence. However, independence did not immediately erase the effects of colonialism. So, it did not, the effects of colonialism persisted. Former colonies continued to face issues such as economic dependency, cultural alienation, social inequality, and political instability. So they were under, colonial rule for such a long time that they had become economically dependent. They had been culturally separated, alienated. There was social inequality and also political instability. Post colonial literature emerged as a response to these conditions, providing a platform for writers to express the experiences and perspectives of colonized people. So this was a platform where the writers from these colonized countries, they could express their opinions and speak for the colonized peoples. The development of post-colonial theory in the latter half of the 20th century further strengthened the study of such literature. So a new theory of post-colonial theory, it came into being, and there were many scholars and writers who uh, would be mentioned in the course of this essay, who were instrumental in popularizing this theory. Scholars examined how colonial power shaped language, culture, and representation, and how literature could resist and challenge these influences. So, these scholars, what were they trying to do? They were studying how the colonial power, which had for so long, exerted its power over the countries, how it shaped the language, the culture, the representation, and how literature could, the own literature, native literature that is, it could resist and challenge these influences. So these two paragraphs would form the introduction to this essay. Now we will move on to the major themes in post-colonial literature. Some of the major themes which we need to know. Firstly, do not number these things, the points, but just write the points. নাম্বার দিতে হবে না 1 2 3 4 করে, এখানে দেয়া রয়েছে কিন্তু তোমরা দেবে না. Just write identity and cultural conflict, make a new paragraph and write. So one of the most important themes in post-colonial literature is the search for identity. এই ব্যাপারটা, আইডেন্টিটির ব্যাপারটা, this is very important. Let us look at this. Colonialism often disrupted indigenous cultures and traditions, leaving individuals caught between their native heritage and the culture of the colonizers. So when a country was conquered by a European power, it imposed certain things on that country. The indigenous cultures, that is the native culture, the traditions associated with that native culture, the people, the native people, they were in a dilemma. They could not make up their mind what to pursue, whether to pursue the native heritage or to adopt the new culture of the colonizers. So there was a kind of crisis of identity. Post-colonial writers frequently portray characters who struggle to define themselves in societies shaped by colonial influence. So, in the writings of the post-colonial, of course, the writers, there may be found characters, or there are found characters who are struggling to establish their own identities. These characters experience conflicts related to language, religion, customs, and social values. So, these you know these characters, they often had these conflicts in their minds, and these conflicts were related to language, the religion, the customs, social values. The question, who am I, becomes central to many post-colonial narratives. So who am I? Obviously, what is my identity? That is the central question. For example, individuals educated in colonial institutions may feel detached from their indigenous roots while never being fully accepted by the colonial culture. The sense of cultural displacement is a recurring concern in post-colonial literature. So, as you see here, the individuals who have been educated in colonial institutions. For example, during the British rule, the schools, colleges, the educational institutions which offered the English education, students who were educated there, they could not relate to the native roots. And strangely enough, they were not accepted by the colonial cultures, the British themselves. So they could not relate either to their native culture or to the colonial culture. The sense of cultural displacement. So it is a cultural displacement. They are being displaced from their position. And this is part of the quest for identity. Number two, or the second point that we can mention, is resistance and liberation. Resistance against colonial domination is another major theme. Post-colonial literature often highlights the courage and resilience of colonized peoples who fought against oppression and exploitation. So, how the colonized people or the native people fought against the colonial oppression. That is one of the main, subjects of study. Writers portray both political and cultural resistance. Both political and cultural resistance. Political resistance involves struggles for national independence, while cultural resistance focuses on preserving indigenous traditions, languages, and identities. So there were two ways in which this warfare, so-called warfare, was going on. Literature itself becomes a form of resistance by challenging colonial stereotypes and presenting alternative perspectives. So one medium was literature. Through storytelling, post-colonial authors reclaim histories that were ignored or distorted by colonial narratives. So this was a potent, medium. Thirdly, we come to language and power. We all know that language plays a crucial role in post-colonial literature. Colonial powers often impose their languages on colonized populations, making them instruments of power and control. Many post-colonial writers face the dilemma of whether to write in the language of the colonizer or in indigenous languages. So this was a dilemma. When you read post-colonial literature, it was in the CBCS sixth semester syllabus, but now it is there in a later semester. You will find such writers as Derek Walcott, who is a Caribbean writer who is really having a kind of identity crisis. Then there are other African writers who have their own indigenous languages, uh, which they have used later on. At first they wrote in English, but later they switched to their native languages. Some choose English, French, or Portuguese to reach a wider audience, while others incorporate local words, expressions, and linguistic patterns into their writing. So they are writing in English or French, but they're incorporating certain indigenous usages. So they are trying to maintain a balance. By reshaping colonial languages to reflect local experiences, writers challenge linguistic dominance and assert cultural independence. Language thus becomes a site of both conflict and creativity. So this is important. What is done? Uh, a writer may be writing in English, as I told you. He or she is writing in English or French, which is the colonizer's language. Now, we all are studying the colonizers' language and literature, English language and literature. So, in a way, we are not studying our own indigenous languages or literature. When you are studying the literature of England or the British Isles, obviously, we are talking about Shakespeare, we are talking about Milton, William Wordsworth, other romantic writers, the Victorian writers, the modern writers, but they are not Indians. So you understand that we are, of course, they are great writers, but they are all foreign writers. But into this comes some Indian writers. For example, you will uh, know some of their names. For example, R.K. Narayan, R.K. Narayan, Raja Rao, and Mulkraj Anand. These three writers, they were all novelists, short story writers, uh, who wrote in English. So they were instrumental in using the language of the colonizer, that is the English language, to write about their own experiences. So the culture, the tradition, everything was expressed in a foreign language. So, cultural independence. So, they were adopting English, which was a foreign language, the language of the colonizer, but they were writing about their own Indian experiences. So, it is a site of both conflict and creativity. So, in this way, next point of importance is hybridity and cultural mixing. The concept of hybridity refers to the blending of cultures resulting from colonial encounters. Colonialism brought together different peoples, traditions, and belief systems, creating new cultural forms. So, obviously, when the culture of the colonizer and the culture of the colonized, they mingle or come together, they blend together, then there is a strange kind of hybridity that is created. It doesn't remain pure any longer. So different people, traditions, belief systems, all these merge together to create new cultural forms. Post-colonial literature often celebrates this cultural mixture while also examining its complexities. Characters may possess multiple identities and belong to more than one cultural tradition. So obviously, when such a mixture or blending takes place, the one individual character may have multiple identities. He may be English, but he might have some Indian elements there also. So, such hybrid identities challenge rigid distinctions between colonizer and colonized. So, the separating line, it is effaced. It ceases to exist. Hybridity demonstrates that cultures are dynamic and constantly evolving rather than fixed and pure. So, cultures are dynamic, they are not static, they are evolving, developing, they're not fixed. Another thing is displacement and exile. Colonialism frequently caused migration, displacement, and exile. Many post colonial texts explored the experiences of individuals who are separated from their homeland due to political, economic, or social circumstances. So, this particular issue, migration or exile or displacement, is very important in post colonial literature. So, as you know, due to the Second World War, many Jews they had to leave their country as they were persecuted in Germany. They had to leave and they spread all over the world. And there were, forced migrations, people who migrated to different lands. So post-colonial texts, they explored the experiences of individuals who are separated from their homeland. They have left their homeland due to political pressure, economic pressure, or social circumstances. These works depict feelings of alienation, nostalgia, and longing for home. So obviously, uh, the generation that have left, they are always looking back with a lot of homesickness or nostalgia. They feel separated because they cannot adjust to this new situation, to their new adopted homeland. So that becomes a problem. Migrants often struggle to adapt to new environments while maintaining connections to their cultural roots. So when they come to a new country altogether, they have to adapt themselves to the new traditions, culture. But it is very difficult for a grown up person to do that. Children can adapt quickly, but people who are old or middle aged, it becomes difficult for them. So they struggle. The theme of displacement reflects the broader disruptions caused by colonial history and globalization. So, this is another very important theme in post colonial literature. Next, we come to the issue of rewriting history. Colonial histories often portrayed colonized peoples as inferior or passive. So, it was the custom of the European rulers to look down upon the colonized. They were inferior people. They were blacks, either blacks from Africa or the Caribbean, or the yellow people from China and other places, or the brown people, the natives from India, the Indian subcontinent. Post-colonial writers challenge these representations by revisiting historical events from the perspectives of the oppressed. So the writers, they have subverted this. They are writing from the perspective of the oppressed people, looking at the history. Through fiction and historical narratives, they recover forgotten voices and expose the biases of colonial records. So these colonial records are often biased. This process of rewriting history allows marginalized communities to reclaim their agency and dignity. So the marginalized communities, the oppressed communities, they have a chance to reclaim their agency and dignity. They have a chance to make their voice heard. Many post-colonial novels reinterpret historical events to reveal the complexities and human experiences hidden beneath official colonial accounts. So many post-colonial novels that we find, historical events are reinterpreted from the point of view of the oppressed, the colonized people. So there are many complexities associated with the experiences. The colonial accounts, they have not fully revealed those. Now, these were some of the issues. Now, some important concepts to remember in post-colonial theory. Orientalism. Now, one of the most influential concepts in post-colonial studies is Orientalism. Now, the Orient, you understand, Orient is the East and the Occident is the West, developed by scholar Edward Said. Edward Said has a very famous book called Orientalism, which you may read, and you will understand how he has questioned the interpretation of the Western writers, how they have portrayed the Orient according to their own likings. Orientalism refers to the way Western societies historically represented Eastern cultures as exotic, backward, irrational, and inferior. So, in these four ways, exotic meaning foreign, it has some strange culture. Backward, obviously, it is not very advanced or civilized. Irrational, it does not rely on rational thinking. And inferior, of course, you understand, inferior to the colonizer's culture. According to Said, these representations justified colonial domination by portraying colonized peoples as needing guidance and control. So there was this phrase uh, called, you may have heard of this phrase, the white man's burden. The white man's burden meaning it was the duty of the colonizer, that is the white man, to go to the interiors of Africa, mostly Africa, and um, raise them up to do uh, such work which would elevate them from the abject state that they were in. So it was the responsibility, burden meaning responsibility. So it is here the same thing, the justification of colonial domination, that the colonizers were justified in ruling over the colonized because the colonized people were very inferior. They did not know what to do, uh, uh, how to look after themselves. So the colonizers had the responsibility of doing that, to help them, to guide them. Post-colonial literature challenges such stereotypes and presents as more authentic portrayals of non-Western societies. So the post-colonial writers from these countries, they are saying, they are writing that all these things are really false. Actually, it is the way the colonizer looks at the colonized people. So it's not authentic. Many at many times they just build this up. Now, hybridity, of course, hybridity you just we discussed. The concept of hybridity was developed by Homi K. Bhabha. He is an Indian. He argued that colonial encounters create hybrid cultural identities that cannot be reduced to simple categories of colonizer and colonized. So, the hybrid culture, mixed culture. Hybridity highlights the creative possibilities that emerge from cultural interaction and transformation. So, the mixture or blending of two cultures, it can create a new culture which has the characteristics or the qualities of both the cultures, and a creative possibility is developed. Subaltern, this particular term is important. The term subaltern gained prominence through the work of Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak. Now, Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak is a Bengali, critic and theorist. It refers to groups that are socially, politically, and economically marginalized. So, she has coined this term, subaltern. She has a very famous essay, which you should read. Can the subaltern speak? So, do the subaltern people, the colonized or the marginalized people, have the freedom or the authority to speak out, to express themselves? So it refers to groups that are socially, politically, and economically marginalized. So in all the important ways. Spivak questioned whether the voices of the oppressed could truly be heard within dominant systems of representation. So within the colonizers' rule, whether the colonized could speak out. Post-colonial literature often seeks to give voice to such marginalized communities. So post-colonial literature has this task of doing or giving voice to the marginalized communities. Now, after the themes, the major themes and some of the characteristics, we will now move over to some major post-colonial writers and their works. Chinua Achebe. Chinua Achebe is an African writer. He is widely regarded as one of the founders of modern African literature. His famous novel, Things Fall Apart, depicts the impact of British colonialism on traditional Igbo society in Nigeria. So, Things fall apart. Actually, it was prescribed in the syllabus. Uh, Chinua Achebe is portraying the character, a particular character called Okonko. Okonko is the leader of the Igbo tribe in Nigeria, in a Nigerian village, and he's a very powerful man, both physically and otherwise. But what happens to him and the society, the Igbo society? Igbo is, by the way, it is one of the many tribes of Nigeria. There are other tribes also, one of the major tribes. So, how the society disintegrates because of the advent of the English missionaries and the advent of Christianity, because the Igbo culture, there was no, they were pagan. They were, of course, not Christians. But how Christianity came. Achebe challenges colonial stereotypes of Africa and presents African culture with dignity and complexity. So he has other books also, but Things Fall Apart is his most famous work. Now, Salman Rushdie, you must have heard of Salman Rushdie's name. He's known for exploring themes of migration, identity, and history. His novel Midnight's Children examines India's transition from colonial rule to independence through magical realism. So this is one of the components of post-colonialism, magic realism. So this novel, Midnight's Children, it depicts two children who were born at the stroke of the midnight hour in 1947 when India gained independence. Rushdie's work reflects the hybrid nature of post-colonial identities. Now, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, he is an African writer also, strongly advocates the use of indigenous African languages in literature. His writings criticize colonialism and its cultural consequences. So, in his novels, in the initial novel, he had written it in the English language, but later on he went back to his native language, which is Gikuyu, Gikuyu. Uh, he argues that language is central to cultural identity and national liberation. So he went back to his native language. Jean Rees is best known for White Sargasso Sea, which reimagines the story of Bertha Mason from Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. So you have heard of the Victorian novelist Charlotte Bronte and her most famous work, Jane Eyre. Now, Jane Eyre, of course, is an orphan girl, and her story is told in this novel by Charlotte Bronte. Now, here there is this character called Bertha Mason, which has been taken up by Jean Rees, and she is uh, retelling the story. The novel highlights issues of race, gender, and colonial oppression in the Caribbean. So, the Caribbean islands, it is the focus here. Derek Walcott, about whom I was talking. Derek Walcott explores themes of colonial history, cultural identity, and Caribbean experience. So he is also from one of the islands of the Caribbean. His poetry reflects the complex cultural heritage of post-colonial societies. So the complex nature of the cultural heritage. So these are some of the major writers. Of course, there are many more, but in short, these names have been discussed. You can look up and include some more writers. Now we will turn to the post-colonial literature in India, our own country. India has produced some of the most influential post-colonial writers in the world. Indian post-colonial literature examines the effects of British colonial rule and the challenges of nation building after independence. So obviously, a country which was under the British for so many years has to engage itself, the literature, the writers, they have to engage themselves with the writing of the The effects of British colonial rule. Okay, so let us look at some of the writers. I have mentioned some of their names. Writers such as R.K. Narayan, Mulk Raj Anand, Anita Desai, Arundhati Roy, and Salman Rushdie. Of course, there is Raja Rao. Explore issues of identity, social inequality, cultural conflict, and historical memory. So all these writers, they explored these issues. Indian post-colonial literature often addresses the partition of India, caste discrimination, gender inequality, and the tensions between tradition and modernity. So these are the issues that are addressed. Obviously, partition of India. Now, rampant caste discrimination and gender equality, which were very much present, and the tension between tradition and modernity. It also reflects India's linguistic and cultural diversity. So, the differences in language and culture in our country. Now, we have come to the end of this essay. We have to conclude by remarking on the significance of post-colonial literature. Post-colonial literature is important because it broadens our understanding of history and culture. So history and culture can be understood uh, in a more, fruitful way. It challenges Eurocentric perspectives and highlights the experiences of people who were previously excluded from mainstream literary traditions. So Eurocentric, you can understand, which centers on Europe, the literature and culture of Europe. By giving voice to marginalized communities, post-colonial literature promotes cultural awareness and social justice. It encourages readers to question dominant narratives and recognize the lasting effects of colonialism in contemporary society. So, the contemporary society, what it is like, the dominant narrative that was done away with, and what was the effect of colonialism. Furthermore, post-colonial literature contributes to global literary diversity by introducing new perspectives, storytelling techniques, and cultural experiences. So the everything is different in post-colonial literature. It is different from the colonial, the colonial rulers' literature. It fosters dialogue between different cultures and promotes mutual understanding. So this is important. Diversity of culture and literature. So we would end our essay on post-colonial literature by saying that post-colonial literature is a powerful and dynamic field that examines the complex legacy of colonialism and its continuing influence on individuals and societies. Through themes such as identity, resistance, language, hybridity, displacement, and historical recovery, post-colonial writers reveal the struggles and aspirations of formerly colonized peoples. So many different subjects, themes. So you have to mention all these themes: identity, resistance, language, hybridity, displacement, historical recovery. So post-colonial writers are engaged in doing all these things. The works of writers such as Chinua Achebe, Salman Rushdie, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, uh, Jean Rhys, and Derek Walcott, you may add some other names, have enriched world literature by offering perspectives that challenge colonial assumptions and celebrate cultural diversity. So, these were some of the writers who were uh, very vocal in challenging the colonial perspective, colonial viewpoint. Ultimately, post-colonial literature serves not only as a record of historical experiences, but also as a means of empowerment and transformation. So, obviously, it empowers the colonized peoples and it transforms them also. It enables societies to reclaim their voices, preserve their cultural heritage, and imagine more inclusive futures. So, all these things are made possible. Reclaiming of their voices, that is, the subaltern voices. Cultural heritages are preserved, and inclusive framework. A future is inclusive, not exclusive. As a result, it remains one of the most influential and relevant areas of literary study in the modern world. So that goes without saying that post-colonial literature and the study of post-colonialism, it has become one of the major areas of literary study in the modern world. So this is our essay, the post-colonial literature or post-colonial important concepts. These we have discussed. So this is our essay, post-colonial literature. Okay. So I have so far discussed with you about 5 essays, I think, on Shakespeare, then on the empowerment of women, the English language, the use of children in advertisements, and now post-colonial literature. So these were some of the important essays that we have discussed.